Oregon, Washington, finally almost here. How confident should everybody feel? Who's got the better quarterback? We're starting there. We are not ending there on this crossover of Locked On Ducks and Locked On Huskies. Roman, are you ready?
I'm so ready.
Off we go.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for a crossover edition of Locked On Ducks. I'm Spencer McLaughlin, and Locked On Huskies. He is Roman Tomashoff, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day, the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you so much for making that the case. You are going to be outrageously prepared for what to watch for in this game where Oregon might not have to win, but very much wants to win, of course. There is not a single Oregon fan that would be content, unless it sets off a Michigan beating Ohio State level run for the Ducks in the postseason. If that's the cost, I still don't know if I take that. But for Oregon's sake, let's hope we don't have to cross that particular bridge. But we're going to get to all the biggest matchups that are going to define this game, personnel and individual player-wise. So, Roman, let's start with the quarterbacks. Dante Moore has been playing very well, only had one bad play against USC last week, and I objected more to the play call than the actual throw. Not that the throw was very good, it wasn't, but that was about it. And the week before against Minnesota, he had 3 incompletions. If you don't put Dante Moore in a complete and total rainstorm, he has been playing incredibly well, and I think containing Damon Williams' legs is going to be a big emphasis for this Oregon defense. I talked about that yesterday on my show, but I think this could be a game that sees a lot of points because both quarterbacks, frankly, playing at a high level.
No, absolutely. And it's one of those things where it's not just the legs with Damon Williams. It's the arm too, right? Where he's completing 72% of his passes. He's thrown for over 2,700 yards this year. He has 19 touchdowns, and coupling that with 500 plus rushing yards, the most in the Big Ten from any quarterback, and 6 scores on the ground. That's one of the things that has made him just so dynamic and so electric all season long, and why it's been so fun to watch him just grow and mature, where there obviously have been growing pains. He throws 3 interceptions at Michigan. He has the bad interception at UCLA last week. I've just been so thrilled by watching Damon all year because it's very clear on a week in, week out basis. You can see him improving in particular areas. And some of the biggest things for me is he's certainly learned to, one of the biggest things I love about him is how efficient he is with the football. But for a long time, he would try to just force things a little bit too much, and has learned a little bit more of when to throw the ball away, when to just be content with, scrambling out of bounds for 1-2 yards instead of turning upfield and trying to gain extra, but taking a big hit in the process. And watching that maturation process this season has been so much fun from the Washington side, because it's very clear that he is, as he continues to grow throughout his career, going to be one of college football's elite quarterbacks. And if Dante Moore doesn't go to the draft, I'm sure that you on the Oregon side feel that same way.
Yeah, I think Dante Moore, when he's at his best, is one of the best quarterbacks in college football right now. And if he comes back next year, man, you will hear me pump up the Heisman campaign like I never really have before. Maybe a little, Bo, next 2023.
I was going to say, I don't believe that.
I mean, I don't know that I was... I'm just always really hesitant with the Heisman discussion for literally any player. So many things have to go right.
Like stat adding against whoever Jaden Daniels played in week 12?
Yeah, I think it was Georgia. I think it was Georgia State.
I believe you're correct.
Yeah, but Washington fans, please relax when you first hear me say this. But for Oregon fans out there that haven't watched Damon Williams, it reminds me a lot of a middle school quarterback, because what you've done with Damon Williams is you have just taken the best, most explosive athlete on the field and said, why don't you just touch the ball on every single play? And then you make him into an efficient passer, and that's what he has been. So see where that went? I know that's
I like it. I do like it. Yeah, whenever you say Washington fans don't get mad, am I fair to feel a little bit skeptical there? I feel like I've heard that.
Very. You've done too many squad shows with me to think anything else. So I think that's what makes this an interesting matchup. Is Oregon has had a great pass defense this year, worst outing of the year against USC, who's got 2 incredible receivers. Looks like 3 because they took away Mekhi Lemon, but Jacoby Lane and Hines, the freshman, had big days. But, you know, just in the middle of the show, you just picked up the cat.
This is the first time he's ever jumped up here. This is a locked on first.
By the way, he's a black cat, right?
Yeah, he is.
Isn't that like bad luck for somebody or something?
No, he's great luck. I love having him around.
Okay, but like generally speaking, black cats are bad luck.
And black cats are adopted at a lower rate because of that. So fun fact, go out there and adopt a black cat.
Yeah, or get a dog because they're better. Anyway, so the had to. So the quarterback matchup is so interesting because these guys are very different. In no way do I think Damon Williams is not a capable passer. He was one of the most efficient passers against Oregon's defense last year. Their pass defense has been much better this season. I think they'll have an extra level of motivation. Hopefully we'll clean up some of the issues they had last week against USC. But, you know, the other thing, too, with that game is, yeah, there were questions about the officiating in a couple spots that contributed to USC's yardage total. But there were also some plays where Oregon just has to flat out be better. And I don't want Oregon fans to look at Damon Williams and say, oh, well, he's just a runner. He's going to carry it, 20 times a game like Haynes King. Like, no, he has that other component. But I definitely look at what he brings to the table. And for Oregon's defense, man, you got to make him beat you from the pocket, which he can. I just think once he breaks contain, it's more dangerous. Whereas for Dante Moore, I think for Washington, you have to pressure him because he's shown that if he's under pressure, like most quarterbacks, yeah, it's a lot tougher. But if you don't pressure Dante Moore, even Washington secondary and limited Oregon pass catchers, Kenyon Sadiq and Malik Benson are still going to be out there. If you don't pressure Dante Moore, he's going to have a really good day.
No, absolutely. And that's the biggest thing where I like that you're going on that angle because to talk about what has given Damon Williams the most fits, it's not just necessarily pressure, where when you look at Washington's 3 losses this year, the biggest thing that stood out is super athletic linebackers that can hang with him in space in a quarterback spy scenario, where I point to Mason Bosa at Wisconsin, who's somebody who I absolutely loved watching on the recruiting trail, by the way. And then you look at Ohio State and Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles and what those dudes are able to do as well. Just everything that has been the biggest downfall, where the offensive line has had its fair share of issues in the middle of the season when in terms of health, when John Mills went down, when Carver Willis went down. But that has been the biggest issue in terms of what has gone wrong for Damon Williams this year, because even for the most part, when things can go right for a defensive line and you're able to break the pocket and you're able to get into the backfield and get some pressure on Damon, he's shown that if you are not athletic enough to stay with him, I know I referenced this on our Wednesday crossover as well, Spencer, but I think it's very much worth repeating that he just has a gear in terms of athleticism, acceleration, and top-end speed that 99% of other players on the field do not have. And I don't even say that as a Washington, media member. That is something that when you watch him on against UCLA on his first touchdown run, he gets 10 yards upfield, and then he just snaps and he's in a different gear and he's at the left pylon before any of these dudes are barely able to lay a hand on him. And it's so much fun to watch, but it's also just so hard to defend, which is what has made this Washington offense so hard to deal with this season.
Yeah, and Dante Moore's legs are going to be used situationally, perhaps. I think if all goes according to plan for Oregon, they don't have to run him. It's not a part of their game plan. Like my favorite play that Jedd Fisch has called this year that I've seen, I think it was against Rutgers on the Friday night game, but the fly motion pin and pull with the guard and tackle quarterback sweep to the edge.
Yeah.
Those are not the sorts of plays Oregon will run for Dante Moore. But we did see against Penn State, for instance, when you're going against a front that I think is much better than Washington's, and it can be tougher to run the ball sometimes, they went to Dante Moore on 2 fourth down scenarios, and they have in some other spots. They haven't always been successful, but they have utilized his legs for design quarterback runs. I think that's the biggest contrast. I do trust Dante Moore to take over this game with his arm more than Damon Williams. If you keep these guys in the pocket and don't let them escape and make plays, I think that's just far easier said than done with Damon, because like you said, sure, he is, I think, the most athletic quarterback in the Big Ten and the most athletic that Oregon has seen this year. I don't know who second place would even be, quite frankly. Like,
it's hard, right? I've been trying to decipher this myself, and I can't come up with one really good answer, which is just one of the really fun things about Damon Williams in this regard is just how unique he is in terms of, again, not just the arm talent and the athleticism, but the combination of both. It's not like, oh yeah, this is clearly the one thing that's going to beat you on any given Saturday. No, it can be any given thing.
well, and I think from a play style standpoint, I don't want to make a one-to-one comparison here because he's not. There's a lot of room to grow, particularly as a passer. But just as a runner, I think from a speed and agility standpoint, I think he's a lot closer to Marcus Mariota than any Washington quarterback I can remember. Just the way that he's able to break the pocket and he will beat defensive backs or linebackers to the edge with his speed. The number of quarterbacks that can do that are good enough to start are few and far between. Even if you think about Haynes King at Georgia Tech, who runs the ball a ton because it's just the way their offense is set up and designed. It's a fun offense to watch, frankly. He's not that fast. He's not that agile. But Damon Williams is, and so that's going to be a really big key for Oregon in this game. When we get back, we're going to get into the non-quarterback matchups, O-line, D-line, secondary, receivers, all of that on this crossover of Locked On Ducks and Locked On Huskies. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at Omaha Steaks. The holidays always feel a little easier when you know the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. And this week is the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. Absolutely huge. And the Omaha Steaks are the kind of meat you want to gift to somebody so they can make a great meal for the holidays. The quality is exactly what you hope for. Incredibly tender steaks, rich flavor, and meals that make hosting or weeknight cooking even easier. Save on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details and check out Omaha Steaks today.
We've also got a message from our good friends over at DUEL. I'm so excited to talk about these new jeans that I've got that I've been able to rock for Washington's last 2 games. They have 5 times the stretch of traditional denim, so they are just so comfortable. I cannot stretch that enough. And the fact they're antibacterial means your jeans stay fresher longer so you can wear more and watch less. And made with Cool Max that regulates your body temperature and wicks moisture, they keep you cool and comfortable as temperatures change. DUEL combines classic jeanswear style with the kind of comfort and performance you get from athletic wear. It really is the best of both worlds, designed to look great and stay comfortable all day, no matter what you're doing. Simply put, DUEL makes the world's most comfortable pants without having to sacrifice style. Trust me, once you try these, they'll be your go-to. Get a pair for yourself or as an amazing holiday gift. Go now to shopduer.com/LockedOnSeattle. You'll get 15% off your first order. That's shopduer.com/LockedOnSeattle for 15% off. One more time, shopduer.com/LockedOnSeattle.
Roman, let's talk about the position group battles that are going to define this game. And the one that pops into my head first that I want your thoughts on is the one that defined last year's game. Oregon's defensive line against Washington offensive line. I know they're improved, and though I didn't think I'd be saying this, I think this Oregon defensive line is as good as last year. Maybe they're like a touch below, but the job that they have done of replenishing guys that went to the NFL draft and were taken all in the first 3 rounds last year is pretty darn impressive. Mateo Uiagalelei's in his 3rd year. Bear Alexander has been a beast. I'm chair of the Amari Washington fan club. If Washington's guards struggle, you're going to see number 52 just living in the backfield all day. And then you have Tatum Tuioti, who's looking like he's going to be an NFL guy as well. So I think last year's high-end talent was a little bit better than this group, but the depth of this group is better than last year. They were essentially rotating by the end of the year 3 interior defensive linemen. Oregon will play probably 4 or 5 interior guys, and you'll see a lot more players. Nasir Wyatt, the true freshman, it's gotten to be the point where he's got a name for the package when he's on the field. They call it third and Nas, and he's just been incredible. He's generated 6 quarterback hurries in 23 snaps this year. So you get to 3rd and 8, number 32 is going on the field. So talk about how you feel it in that matchup, because my confidence in Oregon's defensive line is incredibly high.
Yeah, my confidence in Washington's offensive line is much higher than it was last year. Let's say that. Because
aim low and achieve, Roman. Aim low and achieve.
Hey, we have a theme of that here on Locked On, especially when we get
Obviously
to the Big Ten squad, but we don't need to, go into some of those jokes because that would take up too much of your time in particular. It certainly would. No, when I look at the interior of Washington's offensive line, people are going to hate where this starts, but I think they're going to like where it finishes because I don't know what it's going to look like. I have no idea what the starting interior offensive line is going to look like for Washington this Saturday, but it's mainly due to the injury to right tackle Drew Party. If he plays, then Washington will have left guard John Mills, who has been, another true freshman who's been tremendous on the interior this year. But if Azzopardi doesn't, then it'll be redshirt freshman Paki Finau, who have also been incredibly impressive. And you talk about being the chair of the Amari Washington fan club. I've been the chair of the Paki Finau fan club for a very long time as well. But I look at just what Washington can do along the interior of the offensive line. You're going to see a backup center either way because Landon Hatchett has a club on his right hand. Can't snap with that, so he's going to be on the sidelines. He'll be available.
You got 2 hands? What's the problem?
They tried that at Wisconsin. We all saw how that worked out.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
They tried it for a quarter. He snapped with his left hand. They were like, no.
Does he not play guard?
He used to play guard, but Washington at right guard, I'm glad you asked, is rotating his older brother, Gieran Hatchett, with true freshman Champ Taulealea, who this coaching staff is absolutely enamored with. He's just a real big physical presence. He's listed at 6'5", 330 pounds. And for the last 2 weeks, now that he's able to redshirt, has been a much bigger part of the rotation. They're basically splitting snaps down the middle. And I like the physicality there because this is one of the things with Champ coming out of high school was he just needed to continue to improve in pass protection. He's a really, really strong run blocker. And I feel like the coaching staff wouldn't have him out there at this point if they didn't A, want to see what they had for next year, but B, legitimately trust him in some of these scenarios when it comes to pass blocking. Now, Purdue and UCLA, that's a nice, feeler for him, right? But this is a guy who, again, the physicality, the strength that he brings to the field, I feel very confident in, and this is just going to be his biggest matchup yet. And this is one of the biggest reasons that the coaching staff probably chose this plan and this trajectory for him was to just be able to throw him out there in this matchup, whether it be 50% of snaps or maybe even more, and just say, all right, you got to show us what you have because right now we are planning on giving you a much bigger role next season, most likely as a starter. So show us what you got.
All right, which position group battle do you want to highlight and ask me about?
Ooh, that's it. Let's talk about the wide receivers versus the secondary. So let's start with...
Which one?
You stepped on. I was about to get there.
Oh.
I was going to say, let's start with Oregon's receivers versus Washington's secondary.
Yeah, this is a question coming into the week, whether Gary Bryant will play, whether Tacario Moore will play, who hasn't played since... Gosh, what would the last game have been before Iowa? Yeah, maybe it might have been because he got hurt the week before the week of practice against Iowa, which was after a bye. So yeah, they have been dinged up in a big way. You talk about Evan Stewart not having played a game this year. I don't expect him back this week. It's not technically impossible. There have been some rumblings, but I don't think he's actually going to play. Tacario Moore, I don't know. I don't think so. Gary Bryant is the most likely guy to return, but what that leaves is redshirt freshman Jeremiah McLaughlin, who's stepped up in a big way, and then one-time Florida State, one-time Alabama, one-time junior college transfer, true college football journeyman Malik Benson, who had a punt return for a touchdown against USC and a 30-yard reception, followed by an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, shades of Trayshawn Holden, to which Dan Lanning was less than thrilled. And then he came back and made plays the rest of the day. And so I think what Oregon has come to realize with these receiver injuries is, yeah, guys have to step up, and they have. But the good side of it, the silver lining, is something that Oregon fans and myself were pointing out all year, which is, man, doesn't feel like you're targeting Kenyon Sadiq enough. And all of a sudden, when you have no Evan Stewart, no Tacario Moore, no Gary Bryant, Jeremiah McLaughlin got hurt on the first play of the Iowa game, all of a sudden, who are you throwing the football to? It's number 18, who's going to be the first tight end taken in the 2026 NFL draft. And so he's led Oregon in receiving yards and has had 2 touchdowns in each of the last, pretty sure he had 2 against Minnesota, or maybe he just should have. I'd have to double check. But he's been on fire the last couple of games, and that's just a unique weapon who can line up at tight end, who can line up at H-back, who can line up in the backfield, who can line up at wide receiver, and he can be effective in any of those scenarios. And so, you know, if Washington fans want the best example, I think, of what he's capable of, his second touchdown, I mean, his first touchdown against USC was good. He just cooks a corner off the line, sprints across the field, and Dante makes a good throw in the red zone. But the second touchdown is the one that made Oregon fans go, oh my gosh, we got no hope of keeping this guy after this season, because he runs the seam route on 3rd and 2, and he catches it kind of over his head and pins it to his shoulder pad and gets sandwiched by 2 USC defenders and holds on to the ball. So, you know, the way that he has played the last couple weeks, I think creates a matchup nightmare for anyone, because that's what he is. And that, I think, is going to be a focal point again.
So I'm going to save my Kenyon Sadiq thoughts for a little bit later on, because we're going to talk about some individual matchups. So all our everydayers need to stick around for that. I have some very, very fun and very sometimes outlandish thoughts when I think about how Washington might want to defend Kenyon Sadiq. So that's why I wanted to start with the receiver group, because I can't say that I feel overly positive about Tacario Moore playing in this game, Gary Bryant, just from, you know, some things that I've heard. And I'm curious to see what Washington is going to want to do, because I look at nickel cornerback Rashawn Clark, and I've been just thrilled with the performance he's put together over the last month or so.
How tall is he?
5'11", 6 foot.
Yeah, too small.
I'm not talking about Kenyon Sadiq in that.
Okay.
I'm just talking about, in terms of the overall matchups. But he's such a great athlete in space and in the nickel position. And with the way that Ryan Walters has changed his defense from being, hey, that guy's going to be isolated in man coverage a whole bunch of times, to, okay, now it's, a little bit more traditional. There's a lot more cover 3 involved, and just a lot more just different looks than what he is traditionally used to running. I think Rashawn Clark is one of those guys who, when you still get him into man coverage, has been really impressive in that regard. And speaking of man coverage, the guys on the outside, and Tacario Davis and Ephesians Prysock, who both are 6'4", but don't move like they're 6'4". They are so fluid for their size. I'm very intrigued at what that matchup is going to look like with Jeremiah McLaughlin, with Malik Benson, because on top of those guys, I look at Alex McLaughlin as safety, and he has been one of my
Great name.
Tremendous name. And even more tremendous when watching him on the field. He's been so productive this year. He's Washington's leading tackler. He has a pick 6 and a fumble recovery for a touchdown this season. So he's been really productive in that regard as well. And Ryan Walters loves to move him all around the formation. And that's one guy who I will always look at as an X factor in this defense. And I think one of the reasons that it's been so effective on the back end this year is because of his range and his ability to do so many different things and line up in so many different ways. And you don't necessarily always know what his assignment is going to be on any given play.
Let's dive further into the individual matchups that will define this one. We'll each have a couple, and we'll get to our score predictions, which Roman the Cowardly Lion won't make. So that is coming up next.
We'll see.
First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Now, this game, Oregon-Washington, is Ducks minus 6.5 as I record this particular segment. If you think Oregon is going to roll, then you probably like Oregon to win by a touchdown or more. If you think that 6.5 number is tricky, it is really, really tricky, because if they have a touchdown trade going back and forth, you might be relying on a missed extra point. If you want to have that sort of edge or juice while watching this rivalry game and make the stakes even higher, FanDuel's the place to do it. Right now, FanDuel's giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
So Spencer, just picking up right where we left off there, I want to talk about this Kenyon Sadiq matchup versus Washington's secondary. I mentioned Alex McLaughlin a little bit. He's someone who I'm curious to see how they might want to use him in defending Oregon's best pass catching weapon. But a couple other guys that I wanted to mention in that same regard, I talked about a couple of them as well. And, maybe if you do want to split them out wide, I feel like Ryan Walters would trust Tacario Davis or Fisch and Sprysock with the way that both those guys, again, not just move in coverage, but the way they've tackled so far this year. So that's something I'm really intrigued by. But if you do want to, keep him as an H-back, move him into the slot, do some different things like that, I'm so intrigued as to how Washington might. I talked about Champ Taulealea and trusting him against Bear Alexander and Amari Washington, what that could look like. Zedrius Rainey-Saleh is another dude who 6'3", 225, just moves so well. And being a guy who freshly turned 18, true freshman, does not look like it, does not act like it. His football IQ is so high. And this coaching staff will always talk about how great of a communicator he is, how quickly he's picked up this defense. And you saw him get an interception a couple of weeks ago against Purdue. His skills in coverage are so impressive. And he's one of those guys where you might look at it on the surface and say, hold on, that's a true freshman against a first-round draft pick. I don't know if I like this matchup. But when I look at Washington's coaching staff, if he is one of the guys that they entrust in some way, shape, or form to drop into coverage, whether it be in zone or maybe in man every now and again, we'll see how much man Ryan Walters decides to call. As I said, his philosophical changes have, just really been intriguing in that department. But I just think that he's one of those guys who changes everything on the back end for Washington with how good he is in coverage.
Yeah, if I were Ryan Walters, take my football mind for whatever it is. Does Oregon have other weapons that can beat you? Yes. I think Malik Benson's the most dangerous downfield guy. McLaughlin on the short and intermediate routes is a really fluid runner, explosive athlete. He's got to work on not staying on his feet a little bit more, but when he does, he's really, really good. I think that if I were Ryan Walters, I would look at Kenyon Sadiq and say, I'm either putting my best cover guy on him, Tacario Davis,
sure,
or I'm going to bracket him and say, hey, Dante
Moore. That
was
more my guess, yeah.
Yeah, go make the plays to somebody else. And look, Oregon has those guys, even with a limited receiving core. You'd love to have Kenyon Moore in this spot going against this Washington secondary, but I think the receivers have shown enough to where if that is significantly taken away, that'll be a fun chess match for Will Stein and Ryan Walters to play out with regards to how, they get 18 the ball and how often they want to take those shots and anything like that. But I think those are your, if I were Washington, that's what I would do. Like if I were coordinating Oregon's defense and Kenyon Sadiq was playing for Washington, I'd say, okay, either Brandon Finney is going to cover him a lot, or he's just going to get double covered. And I want to flip over, talk about another matchup, and that's Denzel Boston against this Oregon secondary. Last week, USC showed they're 3 deep at receiver for guys that can just be game changers, that can take over a game at times and make huge explosive plays. I know Denzel Boston is that. Oregon had a really good game plan for Makai Lemon. He had his second lowest receiving yardage output of the year, 7 catches for 34 yards. He did have 2 touchdowns, but they were both within 10 yards of the end zone there. And one time, Lincoln Riley did a good job to scheme him up to be one-on-one with Jerry Mixon, Oregon's linebacker. So how confident do you feel in the rest of the Washington secondary? Because Denzel Boston, yeah, he's going to have catches in this game. Yeah, sorry, the receiving core. Thank you. Where do you feel like that group is at? If Oregon's able to have the same success with a similar approach they had against Denzel Boston, and he's held to 50 yards and a touchdown in this game, where does Damon Williams go?
So first of all, I think a lot of that is going to depend on Denzel Boston's health, which I think is something to monitor coming into this game, where I fully believe he's going to play and he's going to be out there for almost, if not every single snap on offense after rolling an ankle a couple weeks ago at Wisconsin. But I think that's just something to monitor in that regard. And I say that to say that I look at a guy like Desmond Roebuck, the true freshman, who has just been so impressive throughout the season, where he is tied for the program record for a freshman with 6 receiving touchdowns this year. He's closing on 600 receiving yards. And he's been a guy where whenever Damon Williams needs to make a play, he's gone to Desmond Roebuck. And he's somebody who I would say doesn't necessarily have game-changing long speed, but he's a dude who is just like secretly shifty for his size. You don't necessarily expect it. And then he hits a spin move against Rutgers and takes the ball 60 yards and gets Washington inside the 5-yard line. Like, he's got that sort of big playability in terms of run after the catch, but he's one of those guys who he is able to win due to his understanding of leverage and separation. And he is such a crisp route runner with really strong hands. So he's one of those guys who, when I look at just, and you talk in terms of confidence, he's the guy who I think DeMond Williams feels most confident in it at this time. And another guy in that regard, just to throw another name out there, who has been really just tremendous over the last, I want to say 3-4 weeks at this point, is tight end Decker DeGraff. He's a guy who is so athletic in space, and Washington loves to try to scheme him up and get him in space to use his speed, because he can really stretch the field a little bit at the tight end position on wheel routes and different things like that. And that's where we've seen him score the majority of his touchdowns, is on those sorts of plays. He had a nice touchdown against UCLA where he just kind of weaved in and out of like 4 defenders to get to the end zone. But he's one of those guys who, when he is at his best and he's running up the seam and Jedd Fisch is finding ways to get him involved in the offense, I think that's when Washington's offense is really clicking at its best, when you have not just 2 guys, but a third and a fourth.
The last matchup I want to get to before we hit the predictions is kind of a dual matchup. And I talked about this yesterday on my show. It's Oregon's linebackers against the combination, against the Washington backfield, basically.
Sure.
And Oregon's linebackers, they have played much better in the last couple of weeks. Devin Jackson getting back into the fold has certainly helped. Bryce Betcher is very productive. He can have a lot of tackles and not necessarily play his best game, but he's played good football the last couple of weeks. Jerry Mixon you'll see as well. That's pretty much it. They'll throw one of the redshirt freshmen out there for a couple snaps maybe, but really they're going to go with those 3 guys. I think the redshirt freshmen are for next year. But the matchup with Jonah Coleman and how Oregon contained him, I think that was more about the O-line than the linebackers, who played well in this game last year. But the ability to stop those guys from making explosives with the run and making Washington work their way down the field, I think that is what Oregon has to be able to do, and that's going to come down to the linebackers. I don't know how often Oregon is going to have a pin-your-ears-back pass rush that doesn't have a quarterback spy, or have a pass rush that is basically about just keeping the quarterback in the pocket, not necessarily about sacking. I don't think that's going to happen very often, and I think there will be a couple moments in this game where DeMond Williams will break contain, and there will be a quarterback spy on, and it'll be, can Bryce Betcher or Jerry Mixon or Devin Jackson make that play in space? I think they'll study that Wisconsin tape. You mentioned the Badgers linebacker and how well he did in that role. I think that's a huge key in this game, because we know Jonah Coleman and DeMond Williams can create explosives on the ground, and the guys that are most likely going to take that away will be Oregon's backers.
So I don't want to disregard any points that you just made there, because I think you made a lot of really tremendous points in terms of what Oregon would need to do. I want to just throw another name out there, because we've talked a lot about Jonah Coleman in terms of all the time that you and I have spent on various podcasts talking about. We've talked a lot about DeMond Williams. I want to talk about redshirt freshman running back Jordan Washington, because we've seen his workload get bigger and bigger. And, thanks in large part to the injury to Jonah Coleman, which has just opened up more carries for other guys to take. But this offense is just so different when he's on the field. He's a former 4-star guy from Southern California who is a real track star down there, ran a 10.2, 10.3, somewhere in that ballpark in the 100-meter dash in high school. And whenever he is on the field, that speed really shows through. And not just, not talking just about a 68-yard touchdown run that he had against Purdue a couple weeks ago. I'm talking about how Washington has, I don't want to say finally figured out how to use him. I think they just finally are in a just point in terms of personnel where they can use him more so. Because when he's on the field, he's usually going in motion when he's not lined up in the backfield. And there have been several play designs over the last 2 weeks or so, because he was sick and didn't make the trip to Wisconsin, where we have just seen, okay, this is the plan moving forward. And a guy like that is going to be such a big part of it. There's going to be a point, probably not this year, probably not this week, but down the line, where Washington is going to line up in a 2-back set with Jordan Washington and Adam Muhammad and run some sort of triple option with them. And it's going to be beautiful. And I'm going to love every second of it with how much speed that kid brings to the table. And that's why I wanted to bring him up, because he's the guy where if he is on the field and if he is lined up as a wide receiver, he's going in motion. I can guarantee you that. And are they going to give it to him on a fly sweep? Do they want to test this Oregon linebacker core with their speed to the sidelines. Different things like that are things that I'm just really curious about in this matchup.
Sounds a little bit like Oregon true freshman running back, Dare Hill, and all three running backs will play in this game. They'll all get carries. I'm sure Washington fans are going to have this reaction. Noah Whittington is still playing for the Ducks.
I said that in week 2. I said, no way.
Yeah, he's still there, and he's playing the best football of his career. Jordan Davison and Dare Hill are PFF's highest graded true freshman running backs in the country. They've been exceptional. That three-headed monster has been really the foundation of this Oregon offense in a lot of ways, especially in the sloppy games this year. If any weather comes up, Oregon's been in those spots and has won twice because they have three different running backs who can keep each other fresh and also make a bunch of plays. So we'll wrap with our predictions, unless you're going to go your usual route here and just not throwing out there.
Let's do this. No, let's do this. Okay. What do you think I'm going to say?
That you're a jinx and that you're not going to make a prediction because you don't want to be seen as the reason for Washington losing the game.
You're half right. I was going to give you something.
Oh, okay. Yeah, come on, bring it on.
I want to give a shout out to our good friends over at FanDuel. The line is 6.5 right now. Mm-hmm. Give me Washington covering that. That's what I'll say. That's what I'll say right now.
I have a general rule, and that is, unless there's strongly compelling evidence, take the underdog and the points in a rivalry game, and especially at home. Though I think Oregon wins this game, I don't think it's going to be easy by any stretch. Washington is a good team. They're going to have no problem being ridiculously motivated for this particular game. And I trust Oregon to find a way to win and lock up a home playoff game. 27-23 Ducks. They get it done. And the under hits,
I like the under.
Which is 58,
I do like the under in this game.
58.5 according to our friends at FanDuel. If that goes over, Dante Moore and Damon Williams will probably make it a game of who has the ball last. But under 27-23 Oregon. And no prediction from Roman because
I gave you a lot.
I'm just looking for a score prediction.
I know you are.
Maybe I'll call our boss and be like, hey, you need to make Roman start doing this. Start threatening his job security if he doesn't start making predictions. Yeah, okay. Roman Tomashoff, Locked On Huskies. I'm Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks. We will both be talking to you on our respective channels after the game. Oregon, Washington, 12:30 Pacific on Saturday afternoon at Husky Stadium. Appreciate everyone listening. See you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.